Not yet. Good.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Pittsford Central School District Board of Education meeting. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I may have an approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Irene and Robin.
Okay, Deb, did you get those?
Irene was the first, Robin was the second.
Ted, just you can click it.
Irene made the motion, and who made the second?
Robin.
Okay. And may I have an approval of the minutes from November 23rd, please? Ted, if you could shout those out.
Yeah, Renee was the first and Val was the second.
Amy, I'm having trouble. I even missed the second for the agenda.
Ted, if you could use your microphone. I don't know if you need to.
Your microphone's not working, Ted. Test, test, test. Can you hear that, Amy?
Check, check. Amy, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay, could you?
Val made the first, Renee made the second.
I'm sorry.
Val made the first, Renee made the second.
Okay, who did made the second on the agenda?
Robin.
Robin, perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Board of Education reports. As you all know, Monroe County School Board Association, all of our meetings are now virtual. We are going to have Zoom meetings through the end of January. The only meeting that I have that we're uncertain about right now is steering committee, which is the 27th of January. We just felt that that was so far removed at this point that we'll just wait to see where we are at that point. If I were to guess right now, I would think that we'll be virtual for that as well. One particular committee meeting that I'd like to talk about tonight, because there's a lot of information within the legislative committee that Val is actually a co-chair of, that we'd like to have some discussion about a recent email that Sherry Johnson, the director of Monroe County School Boards, came out with in response to advocacy and what advocacy may look like in the era of COVID, and especially in the next few months going forward. As many of us know, typically we make a trip to Albany. That will not be happening. But advocacy does not stop because of COVID. In fact, I would argue that advocacy right now has a definitive place on all of our minds with respect to so many things. But Val, if you'd like to report out on, first of all, the email exchange with Sherry, and also what she's seeking from each board within Monroe County to share in terms of what we can do on the advocacy front.
Sure. So, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So Sherry sent out an email to the legislative committee because we canceled our last meeting, but we're asking boards to discuss a couple of items prior to our January meeting so that we're prepared to just hit the ground running for the next legislative session. So one of the things we're looking at is, as you remember, we had the meeting with the regents in November, and they invited us to give them some feedback. So one of the items that we're looking for is, are there any areas of flexibility or relief that we can ask for in the next 6 months, maybe 6 to 18 months to get us through this year, whether they're either temporary or permanent, just to help us through this year, COVID related. And the other thing is they're asking us to just think about ways that we might actually reimagine education and take that back to the regents and SED and talk to them about what we're thinking, how we envision education moving forward post-COVID. So I came up with a couple of ideas, and I just wanted to know if anybody wanted to share anything out as well. Some of the things I came up with, I mean, first of all, I would certainly look to Mike for some suggestions about what we can do for immediate relief just in the next 6 months for the rest of the year, particularly given that we know that there's not going to be an additional state aid, and that we might possibly even have some aid cut as well coming up just for this school year. But something that I thought would be an easy ask is to no longer require schools to duplicate the SA or the ESSA financial transparency reporting. We know that the state asks for a completely different, set of information. It's the same information that we're giving to the federal government, but they're asking for it to be configured in a different way, and it's just duplicate work for us. So that would be a cost savings right there, and I think that's kind of a simple thing to ask for. But I would also ask that we have no unfunded or underfunded mandates, and any mandates that need funding, that funding comes outside of the Department of Education budget or state ed budget as well. And then on a more permanent basis, I would like to ask for more local control. I would be looking for something possibly regarding APPR, how we're looking at assessments, how we look at the 3 to 8 tests and New York Regents. And along those lines, I would also be thinking about maybe more local control regarding pathways to graduation for students. If we're looking particularly at how we're going to be assessing students, maybe we could look in a different way, maybe looking at, I'm trying to think, maybe just different opportunities, maybe portfolios, maybe different kind of work that they might do in the school as well. As far as reimagining education, one of the things that Regent Norwood mentioned is that he was talking about kids following their passion and being creative and adaptable. And so I feel like if we could find a way to do a more personalized education program for everybody in the future, and possibly technology having a role, we approved that science book for the middle school a year or so ago, and certainly we would need to have access to technology, but to me that just seems like a whole other opportunity for learning and for kids being able to personalize their learning moving forward. So those are just my suggestions overall, but does anybody have anything else they'd like to add?
I would just comment really quick that I think that looking at unfunded or underfunded mandates is a great place to start. I think it's a perfect time to look at all of the costs associated with mandates and allow districts more local control over those issues. I think that's absolutely spot on. I would also say, Valerie, that the idea of personalized education is directly aligned with our multi-year strategic initiative around providing our students with authentic opportunities and high levels of engagement. And I think the science book, for example, is a great example of that. So I would agree with everything that you shared, and I think that we certainly can provide the community and Monroe County School Boards a list of the costs associated with mandates that we've been having to go through the last decade. So thank you.
I think along those lines, Val, in terms of what Mike was suggesting in terms of cost, I know that Sherry is looking for that feedback from each of the individual districts, because it will vary to some degree from district to district. So having that will be tremendously valuable. One other thing I just wanted to mention that I think I've mentioned in the past, but one thing that we may want to look forward to doing is meeting with some of the new legislators, Val, and setting up times to meet with some of the new legislators before their calendar starts to fill up, and introduce ourselves. And actually, that's something that we are encouraging all of our local boards to do, to just introduce themselves to the legislators so that they get a sense of how each district is different from one another and what are some of the subtleties that they need to better understand. So if there is a way to schedule Zoom meetings with local legislators and include, obviously Mike would be great to have in on those discussions, and anyone else from our board that would have an interest in meeting with some of these individuals, I think that would be extremely helpful. Part of what has worked so well in the past is having developed those relationships with our legislators, and I look forward to working with them going forward.
Thanks, Amy. I agree.
Anyone else have anything to add? Okay. Val, thank you so much for your work on this. I truly appreciate it. Dates to remember. We have some dates here. We have the 23rd to the 1st of January. Schools will be closed for winter recess. And the 4th, we will be reopening. And on the 11th of January will be our next board meeting. Okay, moving on to financial report. Darren.
Good evening. We have the Extracurricular Activities Fund Auditor's Report. The overarching or guidance documents for extracurricular clubs are New York State Pamphlet E, as well as Board Policy 5520 and 7410. Management's responsibility is to present fairly the financial statements for the extracurricular club, as well as set up internal controls and procedures. And per your board policy, principals are charged with doing that, and the business office assists them with that. But as far as the actual financial transactions, the business office is supposed to be separate. The auditors are supposed to express an opinion, and you'll notice that this opinion in this report, unlike all the other reports we receive, is a qualified opinion, and that's because per law we're required to have the cash basis of accounting, and that's there to keep it simple for the students to control. They are supposed to govern the clubs, be directly involved, and do the accounting, make the decisions, etc. So with that, there is some inherent risk, but it's not material. So every year that is a qualified opinion. However, the auditors did say that our report did present fairly the financial status of the club. So when you look at the actual report, it goes through on a per building basis, and there's about $370,000 worth of activity. Unless you have specific questions, I'm not going to go through each financial statement. And then the auditors had, I believe it's 7 comments or findings, nothing of strong nature. One thing that they did bring up was because of COVID, it did make the ability of students to have a direct involvement in the operation of the clubs difficult, as well as some of the timing of when invoices were received and when they were able to be paid was made challenging, not just for our district, but for all districts. And then lastly, behind that is the corrective action plan. Director of Finance works with the principals in reviewing their findings that relate to their building and coming up with a corrective action plan. You have those for your information. And then every 2 years, the business office, there's a couple of us within the business office that used to work for an audit firm that audited extra class. So we provide training to all the club's advisors and central treasurers, and anybody that's new to it, we do that as they're hired for that. So if you have any questions, I'll try to address them.
May I have a motion to approve the extra classroom audit report, please?
Second.
Ted, if you could just repeat the first and second for me.
Ted was the first and Renee was the second.
Are there any questions?
Deb
Amy, I'm
is not
sorry.
hearing us. Can you hear?
Okay.
Can you hear me now, Deb?
I can hear you now. I think maybe it's picking up after you already start talking.
Okay,
There's a little lag.
I'll give it more time. Sorry. Ted was the first. Renee was the second.
Thank you.
Any questions from anyone? No? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Human Resource Report, Mike.
Thank you. First, for your consideration is the professional staff report. We have some appointments. Most of them are regular subs during the year. We have some resignations and revised winter coaching, depending on, obviously, whatever the state allows with those sports this year. Please let me know if you have any questions.
May I have a motion to approve the professional staff report?
Irene is first, Val is the second.
Irene and Val, thank you. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Second for your consideration is the support staff report. Again, just some normal mid-year hirings. So if there's any questions, please let me know.
May I have a motion to approve the support staff report?
So moved.
Pete is the
Thank you.
Pete's the first, and Robin is the second.
And Robin's the second?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Special Education Report, Elizabeth.
Good evening. We have CSE and CPSE recommendations on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Superintendent's Report, Mike.
Good evening. There is a need for an executive session regarding pending litigation this evening.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thanks, Pete. And Val, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
We do have on the consent agenda policy 5670, records management, if there's any immediate questions. Okay, thank you. Any discussion regarding the first reading of preschool special education program? Great, thank you. So just a couple updates, Amy. I had a meeting today with a webinar, actually, with the New York State Department of Health. So a few clarifying factors relative to zones and schools. The first clarification that we know has not changed in the last week, which is great, is that schools are no longer required to close in yellow or orange or red zones. We're all able to stay open. There also, based on the governor's announcement today, doesn't look like any substantial changes in zones. So technically, the Pittsford Central School District is in a yellow zone. And because our first round of testing showed 0 positive cases, we do not have to continue with the testing while we're in the yellow zone. Should we move to an orange zone, per the state, we would have to do 20% of our students and staff that are in-person/hybrid learning monthly. That means 10% biweekly. And should we move to a red zone or be clarified a red zone shortly, we would have to test 30% a month or 15% biweekly. So this is not something where we're able to test all 30% in 1 week. We would have to spread it out proportionately over the month. The one thing that would force a building to close as we go through the testing is if we have 9 or more cases that are positive within a building, we would have to shut that building down. A few other things that are possible that would force a closure for us. The first thing is that if the hospitals, so we learned today a little bit more about the matrix the governor is using, but it's not a specific formula per se. It's a combination of our infection rate along with the hospital hospitalization rate. What we do know is that if our hospitals in the region are 3 weeks from 90% capacity, then we would have to close. And that would actually be the whole region would pause and shut down. That's the first thing, excuse me, that would close our schools. The second thing are staff absences. So we're watching this carefully, and actually we're talking as a county pretty much daily, specific to the amount of staff absences that we're incurring, all of us. And obviously, if we don't have adults in front of students, then we can't run a school. So we're hopeful. We've been doing a lot of creative things to make sure that there are appropriate adults in front of students on a daily basis. But it's becoming more difficult each day. Primarily, this is because of the county being overloaded or overwhelmed, our system being overwhelmed, and things are taking a lot longer to get back. So if we have a test that is a staff member that is being quarantined, or if they are a PUI, we're not able to get tests in a timely manner. We're not able to get test results in a timely manner. And so someone that may have been out for 2 days is now out for 6, 7, 8 days, depending on how readily available testing is on that day, and then the duration of time it takes to get the results back. So staff absences, hospitalizations, and the third thing would simply just be a widespread transmission within our schools would force us to close. So right now, we're in a relatively good space in that we are handling the staff. It seems like our hospitals are not at that point, and we're not dealing with a widespread transmission in our schools. So I'm hopeful that we keep pushing forward and we're able to remain open. The other thing I would like to share is that January 25th is the end of the semester. And if you recall, a few weeks ago, I sent a message to families if they were reconsidering learning models, that they were to let the building principals know by Friday of last week. And so today we met with the elementary principals. Tomorrow we're meeting with the secondary principals, and we are processing all of the requests to change learning models. And we'll be doing that probably for the better part of the week, and then looking at the best way to notify families. At this juncture, with looking at elementary alone, it does look favorable that we're able to accommodate the vast majority of families without having to change staffing or changing pods or teachers substantially. So we're in a pretty good place right now relative to that. The last thing I would share is that I feel a sense of helplessness as a superintendent, and I think that a lot of us feel this way, in that we're used to, and we're in this occupation because we like to help people, and we like to solve problems, and we want to heal, and we want to help and support. And we're going on a really long time with COVID, and there's nothing we can do to stop COVID from happening, obviously, which is pretty frustrating from all of us. But I do want the community to at least try to understand that it's definitely taking its toll the longer that we're out. And we also need to appreciate the fact that I think it impacts or has impacted everyone. Even if you're the strongest person in the world and you go through each day, you may not know the gradual shifts or impacts it's having on you. And so I just ask that we, again, so I feel bad because this is probably my 10th time asking this. I'm asking for us as a community to hang in there, to support one another 100% of the time, to try your best to have a little bit more patience, patience with the people that work with you, patience with your kids, patience with everyone around us, and show a lot of empathy. This is a real tough time. My heart breaks for our seniors, as well as all of our kids. This is not a normal school year. It's not a normal year. We do know that there is an end in sight. So I think that's the hope that you have to maintain and keep within you, that this is not going to happen forever. That COVID will be over, and we will be more grateful than ever when that day comes, but we still have work to do, and it's hard. As a parent of 3 teenagers who want to go out on weekends, who want to have friends over, who want to have parties for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and it breaks your heart as a parent to have to say no. And so I know how difficult that is. I would ask for your support in trying to overcome the temptations to just give in or give up. We are close. We're closer than I think we are. But we need to stay in a position where we're using good judgment at minimum until the majority of us have immunity to the virus. So please hang in there. Please know that if you're struggling, there's a million different places for support. I would ask that you start, if you're comfortable with your building principal, to point you in the right directions, not only for your children, but for yourself as well. And we want to be here for you, to help you through this time. And as a community, and this is a big ask, as a community, we really need to put our differences aside, and we need to push through. We're so close. So wishing everyone the best of possible holidays coming up. Wish for everyone's health and safety during the next several weeks. And since we won't be back as a board until after the new year, wishing everyone a happy new year. And boy, are we ready for a new one. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, consent agenda. May I have an approval or a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Pete and Irene. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Excellent. Old business, anyone? New business? I think, as Mike said, we're all looking forward to a new year. That's new business. Public comment. Do we have anyone waiting? Okay. Okay. Hello? Dr. Baker, can you hear us? Can you hear us? We can see you. Can you hear us?
Dr. Baker, can you hear us? Can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Okay, we cannot hear you.
No.
Let's put Dr. Baker on hold and let's go to Vicki.
Vicki, can you hear us?
Hear you.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Baker on hold, and let's go to Vicki.
Okay. Good evening. Yeah, I think he needs some help getting his mute off or turned off. So the mood of the meeting tonight is rather solemn.
Can you hear us?
I can.
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Dr. Baker on hold, and let's go to Vicki.
Okay. Good.
Is that
Yeah,
because
I
they
think
both
he
have
needs
links
some
open?
Off or turned off. So the mood of the meeting tonight is rather solemn. I can. Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Dr. Baker on hold, and let's go to Vicki.
Okay.
Vicki, if you have both links open, you should only be into the executive session link, which is that second link.
Okay, hold on. They were on two different computers, so I didn't know. I didn't think it would be a conflict, but I guess it is. Good evening, all. So a somber meeting tonight. The good news is, I think I heard Mike say there are 0 cases in school. The Department of Health reports that schools are not a transmission, which is also good news. I'm glad that the kids don't have to be mandated to be tested. So what I didn't hear was if there are any plans in the works for bringing back our middle and high school students in the full 5 days, like our elementary kids for the next semester.
Thanks, Vicki. Fair question. And again, I would say that we're always planning for every scenario. Right now, our biggest concerns are that our area has the highest hospitality rate and the highest infection rate in New York State, which means that our contact tracers and systems are overwhelmed. And our worry is that while we do not have any definitive evidence that there's been transmission in our schools, is that the significant overload on the system we've seen is causing delays in communication to schools, which means we have to be as vigilant as possible to rely on our community for doing the right thing before they send their children to school. So right now we are I'm feeling that we're kind of hanging by a thread a little bit and holding our breaths a little bit because 5 days a week right now, while the system is overloaded and overwhelmed, is something that, to be very transparent, something that we cannot do at this point. We are constantly looking at what we can do in the spring. We are looking at right now, looking at a process for virtual clubs to be in person for our students at middle school, actually at K-12, from remote to in person. And so I wish I had an easier answer. I'll tell you this, Vicki, again, to be fully transparent, we know that students seem to be doing fine with this, but they go home to a family, and that's the hardest part with everything. So I have a really good friend whose dad is on a ventilator right now, and the guilt that he feels because of how he contracted it is unbelievable. So he was on a ventilator, is on a ventilator for 6 days now, and it's an indication that it's very real, and it certainly hits home. And so we do want what you want, which is to have kids in 5 days a week, but we need to do it when we have a system that's surrounding us that can be as competent as possible.
So you realize, so the Department of Health, at the direction of the governor, is holding our students' education hostage because they don't have, their ducks in a row. And it's just really, it's criminal that these kids are not getting the education that they deserve. It's been almost a year now. This is going to have an impact going forward for the rest of their school careers. It's been proven that our school, it's been proven our schools are safe. It's just, I think we should be advocating stronger. And that goes back to, what was it, Miss Val? We could be advocating more for our students to be in school, because as we have shown in a community that we can do it. This virus is going to be here forever. How long do we keep do we allow our children to not get the education?
So
continue the way we're doing right now. It's just not fair to them.
Thanks, Vicki. I would say that as we begin the budget process for next year, our budget process includes our students in 5 days a week next year, all of our students. So hopefully that answers the question around how long will this continue.
So it sounds like they're out all this year into the next year.
Well, I wouldn't assume anything at this point. As we know, the year has taken many different turns. Well, if you're not
planning for it at this stage, then it's not going to happen.
So again, I would say that it's not that we're not planning for it. We're planning for every scenario. I've said that multiple times. And the last thing I would say is that we are taking a look at how much our students have lost or not by looking at assessments. And looking at where students are quarterly compared to last year at this time in all of the academic classes. Without question, it's not ideal, but I would close by saying this. I could not be prouder of our teachers and our administrators and our paraprofessionals and our support staff for what they're doing.
I agree. Everybody's working hard. And
thank you, Vicki.
They're very difficult, but, we really need to prioritize the kids and getting them back in school. And I thought I also heard that assessments were being modified and maybe even some things being eliminated. So we're kind of downgrading the quality of the education the kids are getting. But that's a side note. Again, I'd like to express my interest in advocacy. I never heard back on that. This whole reimagine education thing. I liked some of the comments that she said in terms of having more local control. That is definitely a positive, especially if it impacts the curriculum and getting more local control over that instead of the Common Core curriculum. And also, hopefully this hybrid technocratic delivery of education is not going to become long-term and permanent. So that would be something that the advocacy committee could be working on, and getting the kids back in school with their teachers would be good.
I think.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time,
Vicki. I think we found some common ground there. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Let's try this again. Dr. Baker, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Just let me know when to start.
Dr. Baker, you're good. If you could just make sure that you do not have both links up and running. I'm not sure if you do. Okay.
Only one.
Okay, you sound good right now.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to speak to the Board of Education a little bit today. In September, I, like other parents in the district, congratulated you for managing to get our schools open to the extent that you did at the time. And while in retrospect, they weren't as open as fully as they should have been, they were as open as much as you could get them open at the time. And I want to, again, state my acknowledgement of the effort that went forward to getting the kids back as much as they did. It represented a first step toward a return to normalcy for our children, and that was important. And you all deserve credit for that, and I want to just reiterate that even now, several months later. Unfortunately, though, now we're nearly at Christmas break, as we all know, and our schools are not open any more than they were on that first day of classes back in September. And this is true despite the fact that you, the district, and we, its students and parents, have faithfully complied with all of the restrictions, safety measures, testing, and other requirements that Andrew Cuomo has imposed upon us, as well as the additional burden of restrictions that Michael Mendoza and Adam Bello have added for Monroe County residents. And I just want to reiterate, I can demonstrate and give you all a detailed list of the instances where the county officials have added to the state requirements. That is a fact. It is not just Cuomo, it's also our county people who have added additional requirements at numerous points. We have followed all the rules. You have followed all the rules. We've jumped through hoop after hoop after hoop for these people. Where has it gotten your students and our children? In terms of getting people back in school full time, it's gotten them nowhere. They are at the same place where they were in September. Time and again, the in-school testing has demonstrated that the schools are not the source of community spread of the virus. And you all have gone to great lengths to comply, and that has been demonstrated time and again. And again, I congratulate you all for your hard work. Not a single person under the age of 30 has died of COVID in Monroe County. Not one. Zero. Not a single teacher has fallen ill and died from COVID as a result of teaching students in school. Not one. Zero. Not a single community outbreak has come out of the schools. Not one. Those are the facts. Those are the facts. And because there are more people in the hospital right now, I have patients of mine in the hospital right now. I am deeply concerned about my patients in the hospital. They are not in the hospital because the Pittsford schools are open to the extent that they are. And they would not be in the hospital if the Pittsford schools were open 5 days a week for all their students. Until we realize that this is a non sequitur that is being pushed upon us, nothing is going to change, folks. Nothing is going to change. And I have patients, as I said, that are sick in the hospital right now. My wife has patients who are sick in the hospital right now. Please don't say this is real. I know as well as anyone in that room, if not better, that this is real. I also know that these people are not in the hospital because of our kids. And you know that too, because you've done the testing. You've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests, and you have demonstrated that that is not the problem. Please face the facts. You are being sold a bill of goods from Michael Mendoza, Adam Bello, and Governor Cuomo. That is the truth. COVID-19 is a significant public health problem. However, the schools are not the source of the problem. There are other states, 4 other states have legally mandated all children back in school every day, all day. Are their school children falling ill and dying from COVID? No, they aren't. Okay? Are their school teachers catching COVID from their students and dying from it? No, they aren't. You would hear from it very quickly on the news if it were happening. It's not happening. Are their schools functioning as super spreaders? No, they are not. You would hear that very quickly if it were happening. The data are in. The quote-unquote science that they're so fond of talking about is in. The schools should be out of the equation. They are not the problem. I'm almost done. Thank you for listening. Meanwhile, our children, your students, are suffering. They're suffering academically. In the words of a Pittsford student said to me recently, remote learning sucks. Unquote. Remote learning, and that includes hybrid learning, I'm afraid to say, is no substitute for in-person teaching and learning. You know it, I know it, the kids know it, the teachers know it, we all know it. After months of firsthand experience, we should all have the strength of character to admit what that kid said to me. Remote learning sucks. Even more importantly, your students and our children are living through a mental health crisis. I repeat that 0 children, in fact, nobody under 30 has died of COVID in Monroe County this whole year. Multiple school children in the county have committed suicide during school closures. Depression and anxiety disorders in children are more widespread and more severe than ever. Now, we all know several things we didn't know in September. We thought them, but we didn't know them. We know for certain that schools are safe. Cuomo has even admitted this. I repeat, the schools should be out of the equation when it comes to mitigation of COVID-19. They are not the problem. They should be taken out of the equation.
Okay, Dr. Baker, we're going to have to interrupt you. You're way beyond 3 minutes at this point.
Okay, I will finish. I will finish right now. I think this is important, and I think that, you know, the 3-minute limit might occasionally be relaxed a little for something this important. So I'll finish up. Thank you.
You're going on 6 minutes.
Okay, well, geez, that's a long time. I know. This is an important thing. This is about kids committing suicide. So maybe you can wait a minute or two extra. Okay, let me finish. I urge the board to do as I asked at the last meeting, to develop a plan for reopening the Pittsford schools by the start of the 3rd marking period at the latest. Even if you think that's ambitious, even if you think that's a bridge too far, to have a policy that you are putting forward and are advocating for, as Vicki had said, would be extremely valuable. Okay, I urge the schools and you all as leaders to push back against these people that are holding our kids hostage and holding you hostage too. Okay, you are taking heat from people like me because you are doing their dirty work. That's the truth. There are numerous parents who would help you with that. Please open our schools fully. Thank you very much.
Okay. Dr. Baker, if I could just add one thing. You have 7 people seated at the table who are advocates of public education, who are advocating for kids. And we want kids to be back in school. We are with you on that. We ask the questions about the distancing and all the mitigation efforts. So I want you to know that we are advocating for kids to get back in schools. We want to do it safely. We understand your data. We are advocating for kids, and we want to see kids back in school. So thank you for
I appreciate that. Thank you.
For speaking up tonight.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the waiting room? Okay. All right. If I may have a motion to adjourn this evening. And before we adjourn, I'd just like to wish everyone, Dr. Baker and Vicki, if you're still on, and anyone else that's out in the public, we wish you a very safe holiday season and wish you well. And we look forward to seeing everyone back in 2021. So may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I see Robin and Renee. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Good night, everybody.